Welcome to Statistics in Excel video number 49. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on my YouTube channel, then click on my college website link, and you can download the workbook Business 210 Chapter 3. If you're in the class, just go to our Chapter 3 website. Hey, we got to talk about outliers and then box plots. An outlier is an unusually small or large value in the data set. One way to pick out outliers is to use the z-score method. -3 z-score or +3. Anything above or below that within plus or minus 3 standard deviations can be considered an outlier. Now, outliers could be an incorrectly recorded value, a data value that was incorrectly included in the data set, or correctly recorded data value that belongs in the data set. And we're going to use the ABS, absolute value function, to help us quickly analyze a whole data set to see if there's any outliers. Now, here's our little data set, mean of 50, standard deviation of 15. Here's all of our values. Actually, I probably have to zoom in just a little bit here. Now, our Z, we can highlight the whole range, and in the active cell at the top, equals, open parentheses, let's calculate our deviation. The deviation is particular value minus our mean, and I'm going to hit F4. So that's the deviation divided by, hey, our standard deviation. And what does Z give us? I better F4 that, actually. What does Z give us? Z gives us the number of standard deviations above or below the mean. And I'm going to Control and Enter to enter all those. I'm going to get rid of all that formatting. Just like that. I went back to general formatting. Now, how do we quickly see? We can eye this set, right? We can eye this set. But what if you had, 500 values or something? You'd want some formula you could create here and copy down. Well, it's straightforward. Remember, it's 3. It doesn't matter if it's a -3. It's the distance away from 0. That is the perfect time to use the absolute value function. ABS. And you say the absolute value of this, because you want to say, are any of these, irregardless of the sign, equal to greater than 3? So this will just give us 0.53 for minus 0.53, etc. So when we say, is that greater than 3? Control Enter, and then we can double click and send it down. Now, as soon as we see a true, then we know that that is an outlier, and we can go examine that one. Maybe in this case, that really was a data entry error. That should have been 50. Now, I'm going to leave that back there like that. That's done with conditional formatting. Now, we did outlier here. Let's go over, and we're going to talk about a slightly different way to calculate an outlier. And we're going to see how to do a box plot. A box plot. Hey, it is a visual way to display 5 values. Actually, sometimes more than 5 values. The min, the quartile 1, 2, 3, and the max. These 5 values are called the 5-number summary, and they can be visually portrayed with a box plot. You can also put outliers, and sometimes people put the mean in a box plot. Let's just calculate these 5 values, and we'll start there, and then create a box plot. I'm going to show you in Excel, even though for our class you do not have to do the Excel part, but you do have to be able to draw one by hand, which I'll show you also. And in this little section here, I'm going to do quartile 1 and 3 by hand. Now, for a large data set, you want to just go use the quartile function, because it'll be just fine. For a smaller data set, as we saw before, you can get really quite different values for quartile 1 and quartile 3, doing it by hand or in Excel when you have a small data set. Now, when you look at the homework solutions, you'll see that I did it both ways, and you can see the difference. But I want to show you by hand here. Now, the min is easy, min. And I'm just going to highlight this data right here. I'm actually going to copy this, Control C, and then hit Enter. Quartile 1. Now, we have to do a little calculating before we can figure this out. Now, 0.25. First, we've got to figure out the position or the index. And the way we do that is we say our n. And n is the count of the number of values. So I'm going to use count. And I'm going to highlight this data, and I'm going to hit the F4 key. count, that gives us what, 8 or something here, times whatever our percentile position, or in this case, quartile, which would be 0.25. Now, I can't get to F3, so I'm actually going to click right there and then use my down arrow, because this formula is crowding out, so I can't click on it, but that's one way to do it. Now I'm going to Control Enter, and there's 2. I'm going to copy that formula and then paste that formula right there. That's why I locked that, because I knew that when I pasted it down here, it'll take that same count times 0.75. Now, by hand, here's how you do it. If it's a decimal, so if it was 2.5, you just go up and take the next one, so I plus 1. If it's an actual integer like this, or a whole number, we want to just average I plus 1. So I'm going to get an average here, equals average. That's the wrong function. Average, and I'm going to average these two, I plus 1. Now, for this one, I'm going to do the same thing, except for instead of 2 and 3, I'll do 6 and 7. I think it's those two right there, and then Enter. Now, quartile 2, we know quartile 2 is the same thing as percentile 50, and the same thing as what? Median. So I'm going to highlight. Actually, I can Control V. Oh, no, I lost that data, so I just have to highlight it. OK, we're almost done. We got 4 of our 5 numbers we need for the 5-number summary, max. So there it is. And now visually, how do we portray this? Let's just take a look down here. This is how you would do it right here in Excel. We haven't calculated the rest of this, so let me not show you that. But let me show you the this one right here. This is, I'm going to right click and show comment. I have my hand drawn version inserted in a comment here. Let me make this a little bit smaller. This is our goal with a box plot. You visually portray. This is the first quartile, the median, and the third quartile. And then there is a line drawn like a tail with a little dash. And in this textbook, they say go to you calculate your lower limit. Everything outside is an outlier. Your upper limit, everything outside that is an outlier. And then you pick the biggest value inside that limit, and that's how far you draw your line. So in this case, we'll calculate our lower limit 12.75, our upper limit, and all the values are within those two limits, so there are no outliers. So there it is. You draw a line, and then there's that value and that value. That's a box plot. It's a visual portrayal of those 5 numbers. Now I'm going to have to move this out of the way, scroll over here, and then right click and hide comment. By the way, those comments, when you insert them, when you point to them like that, they pop up. All right, so let's go ahead and calculate our interquartile range, which we're going to need to calculate an outlier. These are the lower and upper limits. Lower and upper limits. It's quartile 1, and then you subtract 1.5 times interquartile range. For the upper limit, it's quartile 3 plus 1.5 times interquartile range. So interquartile range equals Q3 minus Q1. And that gives us our interquartile range of 6.5. Now, our lower limit, anything below this would be considered an outlier. We take our quartile 1 and we subtract 1.5 times our interquartile range. So it's taking 1.5 times the interquartile range and subtracting it. 12.75. So we don't have any values below that. And then the upper limit, not quartile 1, but quartile 3. And then we're going to add 1.5 times our interquartile range. So 38.75. If we had some smaller, bigger value, if there was some outliers, then we'd have to pick a small and biggest value to put inside for this line right here. Now, I am going to show you how to do this chart. Again, there's the by hand one. That's all that's required for this class. This is a little bit esoteric, but interesting nonetheless. OK, I'm going to delete this chart, and we'll just do it from scratch. Now, you also want to calculate the mean. Now let's go down here and see this chart in Excel. And this is going to end up looking like, you don't have to, for this class, you're not required to do this kind of chart in Excel, but you are required to know how to do it by hand. Here's the first quartile, the median, and the third quartile. This outlier goes up to the biggest value inside our limit, down to the smallest value inside the limit. And I'm also going to show you how to add the mean. Sometimes people like to see the mean here too, so that way you can consider the median compared to the mean. That'll indicate a little bit of skew also. All right, so I'm going to delete this chart and then go ahead and show you how to do it for those of you that want to see. But oh wait, let me just give you a little insight. If we were going to make this is going to be a stacked bar chart. A bar would go like here and then show you all the individual pieces. Well, how in the world? This is the minimum, right? If we were to have a bar going like this from 0 to 15, that would be easy. We'd just put the 15th value. But how do you get from, and let's just take a look here, how do you get from 15 to 22.5? If we're going to trick the chart wizard here, in essence, to make a stacked bar that high and then one this high, it's really the differences. Because if I went ahead and plotted 15 and then 20, 22, 26, it wouldn't work at all. It's really you want to plot a 15 and then the difference between quartile 1 and this, which is 7.5, and then the difference between this one and that one, which is 3.5. So it's the differences between all these elements which will be the conceptual trick to constructing this stacked bar chart. And then we have another little trick to get the mean on there, which is an XY. So we're actually going to have two chart types, a stacked bar and an XY. Now I'm going to delete this. And whoops, I shouldn't have had those there, because I do want to show you how to do this right here. Now the whole trick is differences. So watch this. I'm going to say equals. And I'm going to be tricky here. Notice how these are all right on top of each other. I'm going to take min. And really, for this first one, you just want min, 15. But for the next one, you want this one minus this one, and then this one minus this one, etc. So watch this. I'm going to say minus, and then click on this one. Now, the whole trick here is there can't be anything in this cell except for a blank, because 15 minus a word will give you an error. So there it is, 15. And now I can copy this down. Now, if you don't believe it, I'm going to put it into edit mode. And sure enough, it got the difference because they're relative cell reference. 34 minus 29 is what? 5. And that's exactly what we're going to need for our last little error bar. Really, the middle part here is what we're going to want. That's going to be the starting. And then the stack bar will go 7.5. Then it will go 3.5. Then it will go 3. All right, now watch this. We're going to highlight this whole range right here. Go up to Insert, Bar, and then Stacked Bar. It's the second one. Oh, that doesn't work at all. First off, we're going to go up to Design. This is all in 2007. Design and Switch Row and Column. And just like that, we get kind of what we want. By the way, I have notes down here at the bottom if you want to, below here that give all the steps. I think there's 12 steps or something. Now, the first thing is, remember, we only want this middle part when we saw the by hand one. So we're going to click here on this one piece. You don't want all of it, just the little circles around that one. So you can do something to that and Control 1, which is Format Cells or Chart Elements. And then I'm going to go Fill, No Fill. And then I'm going to click here. This is a good indication of what you have to do sometimes with Excel chart wizards. You really have to think of tricky ways to trick it. So fill, no fill. So that was a way to get these floating out in the middle of nowhere, but it was going to be hard to get them floating out here without some kind of trick like that. And finally, we need the last one too. Also, I'm going to get the fill and then no fill. Notice in 2007, you can do something in the Format dialog box and click on different pieces and go back and forth. In the older Excel, you couldn't do that. Now I'm going to click Close here. OK. Now we need a little bar that goes to the minimum and one that goes up to the maximum. Now, I need to somehow click on that invisible bar. And you can click here all day and sometimes, oh, well, there it is. But here, let me show you a better trick. Click on the one that you can see and then use your left arrow. And that's a way to highlight it. Because we actually have to add an error bar to this. Now, I'm going to have to scoot this to the side. I'm going to go to the layout ribbon. I know it's really squished there. But I want you to see that you got to go to analysis and then error bars. And then down to more error bars. So that's the whole pathway to get to your errors. Now you can see this is an error bar. That's totally not correct. We're going to say minus. And how far do we want it? Remember, this whole, we clicked on that invisible bar. And we really want, in this case, the minimum was at this exact point right here because that was our first line, right? So if your goal is to get this line to go to the minimum, you just say error bar minus, and then it's working there. But sometimes it does, you put 100%, and that means it'll be 100% of that bar. OK? And then click close. Now, the next one is we want it to go from this line up 5 because from the third quartile to the max is exactly 5. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to highlight the, there's 1, 2, 3, this fourth part here and add a positive error bar. Now I'm going to go up to layout, analysis, error bars, and more error bars. I know you can't see that. We did it the first time. Then we're going to go plus, and we have to go to custom. Now, before you click on this, you have to make sure, and you know what? Well, I can't get to it because you can't, once this is open, you can't really move the chart. So I'm going to have to close this, and I'm going to scoot this down because the value I want is right there. So I'm going to scoot this up here. And I also want to make sure that that little thing, I'm going to hit delete. Because I don't want that one there. That was the mistake I just made. Got it? So I'm going to click there. Go out to Layout, Analysis, Error Bars, More Error Bars. I'm going to say plus, Custom. And before I click on that right there, I'm going to make sure I can access it. And then I'm going to click on Specify Value. And I'm going to hit Delete to get rid of that. And the positive value I want is that. And then click OK. And then click close right there. And now we got the essence. And that really is the essence of a box plot. Now, the last little part of this is we want to add the mean. Notice that there is a 1. That's default. If we go up into this chart, into Design, Select Data, you can see it puts a 1 by default. So I'm going to use that to my advantage because I need to add an XY scatter here. And somehow, since this is this is not an XY here. This is just a bar chart. The category is here, and then some numbers are here. But for the XY, I need to get XY, whatever, the 25.5 is the X value. And I'll trick it and say the Y value will be 1. And then it will plot it up here. So let's go ahead and make sure we have our 25 and our 1. Now, I may not. This is going to be a little clumsy, but here we go. Ready? Highlight the chart. Go up to Design, and then Select Data. I'm going to click Add. And the series name, again, oh, I can't. I have to click Cancel here. Cancel. Scoot this down. I just got to be able to get to your data. Design. Select Data, Add. And then the series name. It doesn't really matter which one I put here because it'll get messed up and we'll have to come back and edit. And the series value, I'm going to click as 25. And then click OK. Click OK. Whoops. And that's totally messed up, but no problem. We'll do 2 things. The first thing is we'll change the chart type. Go up to Design, change chart type. I'm going to say XY scatter. Click OK. Ooh, yuck, that's not right. But now go back up to Design, Select Data, and let's find our mean. And when we click Edit, now we have what we want. We have our series name, our X value, and our Y value we're going to say is what? 1. Boom. And that's what we're doing. We're tricking it to get it to shove itself on the, whoops, I made a mistake there. I'm going to delete that. And click on that one right there. And then click OK, click OK. And sure enough, we have our box plot with a mean. Now I'm going to get rid of this legend here. One last trick that, we can get rid of this too, this axis, delete. One last trick that would be nice is to have a label. Now I already made this label here. You can either just type it out. If you know how to use character 10, you could make a formula like that, which is ridiculous. It makes it dynamic. But if you're and if you download this, you can look at that formula. But there it is. I just pretend I type those out. And then it's a simple matter of adding a chart title. So I'm going to go to Layout, Chart Title. I'm going to say Overlay because I want to move it off to the side. That way it won't change any proportions here. And now, what do I do to link a label in a chart to a cell? I either click up here with a mouse or hit F2, get the cursor flashing up there, hit equal sign, and now I'm going to scroll down and click on that cell, and then hit Enter. Now I'm going to change the font size on this. Change it to maybe 10 or whatever you want. And then I'm going to point, and when I see that cursor right there, I can click and drag, and now I have my label. I can control 1 on that label. And why don't I add some fill? Since you can see the lines, I'll add solid fill, and I want white. And then click Close. And so there we have a box plot. Isn't that a very convoluted way of doing that? So there it is, box plot with a mean and a label. All right, that's it for chapter 3. Coming up next will be chapter 4, Introduction to Probability. All right, see you next chapter.